they belong and have a voice. And also picking on what you were saying about sensory processing, it's often something that, yeah, it comes quite often, especially for families at home. So I think it will be really helpful for families. Maybe if you can explain a little bit more around how sensory processing can also impact on children's capacity to self-regulate, whether we can call it even self-regulation as such a, sometimes if we talk about early years when they actually what they need is that ongoing and positive experiences of co-regulation, and maybe some tips or strategies that families can use at home to support their children with sensory regulation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, sensory processing differences are a big part of the neurodivergent profile. I think the current statistic is about 95% of neurodivergent children will have sensory processing differences.
Wow.
And in essence, what it means is kind of exactly what it says on the tin, really. That information that our sensory systems get, and then the way that it's processed kind of gets a bit lost, gets a bit kind of tangled up. And so the messages that go to the brain in terms of that processing period of time, it kind of jumbles up. There's a misconnection, misfiring of those messages. So the outcome, therefore the behavior that we see, is not necessarily what we would consider a response to maybe how somebody else would process sensory information. So as a kind of very quick kind of example, if I was walking, as I did with my eldest, if we were walking along a main road, just going from one place to another, and an ambulance came past, and we didn't hear it coming because it didn't have the sirens on, and then all of a sudden it would get to us and, you know, make that the sirens would come on. For the neurotypical brain, we might be a bit alarmed, and we might be a bit, oh my gosh, that hurt my ears a little bit. And then it would be done because you knew that it would go and it would pass. Yeah. It might frighten you a little bit, but that's okay. But for that individual with sensory processing, that has the potential to send that individual into this fight-flight response because they have sensed this perceived danger. So the response could be a response where actually that child bolts, that child runs, that child starts to scream and has a meltdown on the floor, because they are now completely dysregulated by what happened. But I think it's really important for us to understand, especially as a parent, and this is something that I wish I had known when my eldest was in his earliest years, because I think things would have been a little bit different. So we have our 5 external senses: smell, taste, touch, sight. We know those. We're taught those in our own primary years, aren't we? You've got 5 senses.
Yeah,
what can we smell? What can we hear? What can we touch? What can we taste? However, we need to understand that there are an additional 3 internal sensory systems that, when you know them, to be honest, it's this major light bulb moment, because you're like, oh my gosh, oh yes, I can see that. So just very quickly and very briefly, because it could take over a whole hour's conversation just talking about the 3, but we've got the first one, which is your vestibular system, and it's located in your inner ear, and it's all around balance and coordination. So, and for many of our children, they have an underdeveloped vestibular system. So the messages that they're getting is that sensory system needs some stimulation. That sensory system needs feeding because it's underdeveloped. I need to grow it. So they might do things like spinning. They might like rough and tumble play, roly-polies. They might, as my eldest did, watch TV upside down. He'd put his feet on the sofa and have his head hanging down. So you know that kind of head rush that you get when you're upside down. Their body is seeking that sensory input. So when you are seeing those kind of behaviors in their play, it's that understanding that they're wanting that sensory system fed, and actually by feeding that sensory system will create this sense of calm and regulation. So imagine a way of kind of describing it, imagine you're really, really hungry and you've got a really empty belly and it's rumbling and you can literally feel this kind of empty vessel in your tummy.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to get rid of that pain and that feeling is some food.
It,
Going for a walk or sitting in a cozy corner somewhere is not going to get rid of that feeling. And
mm,
that's what's happening with the vestibular system. They need that feeding. So that's the first one. The second one then is proprioception. And proprioception is about where your body is in space and your kind of internal sat nav, if you like. So
mm,
I'm currently sat on a chair at my dining room table. I can feel where my bottom is. I can feel that my feet are on the floor and I can feel where my arms are on the table. A child with an underdeveloped proprioceptive sense is going to be sort of moving around everywhere. The children described as being unable to sit still, bouncing
mm,
off the walls, wanting that rough and tumble for kind of sensory
yeah.
feedback, jumping up and down on the trampoline. All of those things are feeding their proprioceptive sense. So a lot of parents talk about the fact that their child is wired before bed. They're
Yeah.
bouncing around and we can't calm them down. Actually, that's what they need to calm because it's
Yeah.
feeding that sensory need and it's
Mm-hmm.
feeding that sensory system. So again, they're not going up to their friends to squeeze them, to be nasty, to kind of hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it
They
because
just
they want
need a feeling.
to
Mm-hmm.
squeeze,
Very
they
input.
need that feedback. And quite often when our children are dysregulated, some kind of deep pressure, stroking, hugs, squeezing of the arm or the legs can really kind of help to regulate and calm. And then the last one is interoception. And it's the messages that come from your internal organs to your brain. So those messages that tell you that you need a wee, you're
Mm.
hungry, you're thirsty, you're full up,
Oh.
you're hot, you're cold. Again, there's a misfiring of those messages. So potty training can be really tricky for our children.
Mm.
Um, Children will not know when they're hungry, so it's that conversations around we need let's eat now to because again, you know what it's like when you're hungry, you get a bit hangry, don't you?
Yes.
Children might
I
not
do.
know that they need to eat. Um, Being thirsty, my eldest, he's 17. I still have to remind him to drink because he's not getting the messages that
Mm.
he's thirsty. So, take some water. Um, and also with interoception, it relates to those big emotions and those big feelings. So when something is triggering our children, we can sometimes get a response that we think, where did that come from? I only just, you shouldn't be responding that way. It's only something
Mm.
minor. Don't those really big feelings and big emotions, they're not sure how to respond to those and how to process those. So
Mm.
which is why we often see that high level of dysregulation in our children too. So there's lots of factors. The five senses, the external ones we have, our children find things too noisy, they don't like certain clothing, they might have a limited diet with what they're prepared to eat because of
Yeah.
the seeking sensory system. They might want to chew everything and bite everything because, again, they're
Mm.
wanting feedback. So, sensory processing is a massive element of our children's profile. And once we understand that, we can kind of respond and view our children through a bit of a different lens because we understand the reason why.
I
So,
love
therefore, we
that.
support them a little
I
bit.
love that you compare it with hunger because then it demonstrates that it's a human need and you need to meet them where they are. And I think that's very
Absolutely.
important, especially I'm thinking now even of classrooms that sometimes, we might stop certain responses, certain behaviors without actually tuning in and thinking, what are these children's needs? What is this child seeking? How can I support this child? And
Yeah.
sometimes we are so quick, right, at the stopping a behavior, not really looking into what's happening. So
Yeah.
I'm going to remember comparing it to hunger because it's true. If you're hungry and they're just sending you for a walk, or you're still hungry and it gets worse
Yep.
and worse because you cannot focus on anything else. You're just so worried
No.
about, your tummy's making noise. It doesn't feel
No.
great.
And
Yeah.
the other thing as well is I think when we see some of these behaviors, we're quick to kind of, right, come on, you need to come and calm down. You need to come and kind of take a moment, or you need to come and sit with me in the sensory corner or the calm corner. But we need to understand that for some of our children's behaviors, it's telling you that there's a sensory system that needs activating, not calming. So if they're bouncing off the walls and moving about or jumping around or trying to squeeze, going and sitting in the calm corner
That's not
and
going to
kind of
help.
not going to help. We need to give them something as the outlet for it. So again, it's viewing our children and thinking, okay, does that sensory system, what are they telling me? So be that curious behavior detective and figure out the why. And just sometimes just taking that 4 or 5 seconds. Where's that coming from? Why are they doing that? What's happened just before? What is that behavior telling me? Can just allow us to approach that child with a more conscious response rather than that big emotional reaction, like you say, stop it, don't do that, don't do this. Yeah, just be curious.
I like that, being behavior detectives and being curious of, what's happening, where is that coming from? And I also like that you highlighted the bedtime, which happens so often. That you have children going, you feel like the energy is going really high, but you are so right. And we tend to say, no, it's time to sleep. We need to calm, we need to relax. But sometimes I think if you say that to an adult, if you tell to an adult, oh, just calm down, I mean, what reaction you're going to get? Even if it's the nicest person, the reaction is not going to be really nice. They're going to feel very offended.
No one's ever calmed down by being told to calm down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also important for us as adults to place some responsibility, in the sense that we need to acknowledge our role as well, but making sure that we self-regulate ourselves as well.